Hey everyone, so almost exactly 1 year ago I got this watercolor set from Roman Szmal, and I thought that after a year of using this set I would review it and see if my opinion changed. So since then I expanded it a little bit with some new colors, but I will start with the colors I first got, and after I talk about the paints that I got back then, I will review the ones I got later as well. By the way, you can check out the unboxing video that I made 1 year ago to see my first impression of those paints. At the beginning, I can say that I definitely love using those paints. They brought me back to painting because my previous palette didn't give me any joy to use, unfortunately. I have quite a lot of colors. What surprises me the most when I look at the swatch chart is how many greens I have. Mostly because green is the color that you can so easily mix, and I have so many of them. While looking at the reds, I basically have no warm red, and I probably have more violets than reds. There are also many fun colors. Most of them are the granulating mixes, and they are something that you can definitely live without, but since they do give me a lot of joy to use, most of them I would buy again. It's definitely not a limited palette, and there also are some colors that I would like to add to it, but I have no space and I try to limit myself, so I probably won't for a while. As I said, those paints are by Roman Szmal, which is a Polish brand, and I only found out about it last year. I have no idea how it happened that I hadn't known that they existed before, but I am very glad I did find out because they are very good quality, and living in Poland, they are much more affordable to me than getting other professional brands that I did think about, but I would definitely not be able to get that many colors. Of course, it's not necessary to have that many of them. My priority was getting back to painting, so the more fun I can get from it, the better for me. As I mentioned, they are very good quality. They are very pigmented. They are light fast, which is my number one priority because otherwise I couldn't sell any of my paintings. So they do check out almost all of the boxes. The only thing that I did hesitate about was that they only come in pans, and at the beginning when I started to look for new watercolors, I was quite sure that I would get the tubes. I definitely don't regret. I love using them. I love what they look like in the pan. They are so beautiful. However, if you want to mix a lot of one color and you only have tubes, it is much more difficult to mix huge amount of the color. And sometimes it can be very annoying because you keep running out of the paint you mixed and you have to mix it again. You might get a different shade to what you already have on the paper. I've heard a rumor that they think about making the tubes, but to be honest, I have no idea if this will happen or when. But honestly, this is the only drawback of this brand that I can think about. Hey guys, editing me here. I've actually found out recently that some of the Polish artists are already testing the tubes, so they most probably are coming. I still don't know when, but it's most probably true, so this is a very good news. They do rewet very easily. I do paint a lot with them because I mostly paint with watercolors nowadays, and this is my only set that I use. But I don't always have time to paint, and sometimes they are left unused for a very long time. I definitely don't paint every day or even every week, so there is time for them to dry, and I haven't had any issues with them being so dry that I cannot lift the paint. I did notice that some of the colors have edges between the paint and the pan. However, I haven't had any issues with the paint falling out of the pan, at least not yet. With some colors, I have an issue when I can't get them intense enough, but I think it's the characteristics of the color itself, not those paints. I don't have any other brands, so I don't know for sure. It's actually only 3 of them. It's Cherry Quinacridone Red, Perylene Violet, and Perylene Green. With the Perylenes, I'm not sure if this is normal, but Cherry Quinacridone Red seems like a very pale color in general. They are still very pigmented. It's not an issue with too little pigment, but they just don't get a very dark value. So when you lift them from the pan, sometimes you have to work a little bit more to get enough of the color to get them to their full intensity. So let's start to talk about the colors that I have, what I think about each of them after painting for a year. The first color that I got was Nickel Azo Yellow, and I think it's a very nice color for beginning, and I'm really glad I got this color. It is very beautiful when it's diluted. It's very pale but bright. It has kind of a glowy effect, and when it's not diluted, it can get quite dark. It's very warm and sunny. I haven't tried many other yellows, but to me, it seems perfect. Next color I got was Quinacridone Gold. I got it mostly because a lot of people mentioned it as an amazing color, and to be honest, I didn't see it at the beginning. It was alright, but it didn't wow me, and I wasn't sure when to use it. But after a while, I find to really like it. I honestly use it a lot. If I remember correctly, it has the same pigment as Nickel Azo Yellow, so when diluted, it looks a little bit similar to how Nickel Azo Yellow feels when it's not diluted. It has such a glowy effect that is probably really hard to get with anything else, and right now I can't imagine my palette without it. Next color I got back then was Aquarius Brown. This is a brown that granulates a lot. It has only one pigment, so it granulates without any color variation. When the paint is fresh, it has quite homogeneous consistency, and soon it starts to granulate a lot and a lot of spots appear. It's a nice color, but I don't find many uses for it. I would definitely say it's not a beginner's brown, and it's not a perfect choice for the first palette. So far, my favorite use of it was for adding some texture to stuff like rocks or trees, some foliage. It can get especially nice when combined with some greens or cobalt blue. So I do use it and I do find some purpose for it, but it's definitely not something I should get back then. Next is Aquarius Orange. I honestly think it's one of my favorite colors. This is such a bright orange. It's almost fluorescent. I've never seen a paint like this before. It gets very nice browns when combined with ultramarine blue, and I definitely think this is a very useful color to get. I use it quite a lot. The dent in the surface of this paint is quite big, I would say. Cherry Quinacridone Red is also a very nice color. It has a very nice coral shade, and it's very useful to glaze some red when you don't want it to be too intense. And this is because it's hard to get a dark value with it. It's quite a bright color. I'm not sure if I love it. I do find it useful, but sometimes I wish I was able to achieve a darker shade with it. But at the same time, it's often very useful that it's not getting too dark. I think a summary of this color is that I have mixed feelings, but I do like to use it, and sometimes it's perfect as it is, and I wouldn't change it because, for example, with the next color, which is Permanent Alizarin Crimson, it's much more difficult to achieve a slight red tint because of how intense it can get. And Cherry Quinacridone Red is much more easier unless you want to add something intense. So the next, Permanent Alizarin Crimson. I think it's my favorite red. I also had it in my previous palette that I talked a little bit about in my previous video. And similarly to yellows, I also haven't tried many other shades of red. So I'm probably not the perfect person to judge, but I really like having this cold red shade because it's quite easy to make it warmer by adding yellow or orange, while the other way around, it's not that easy. In my previous palette, I did have some warm red as well, and I almost never used it. Alizarin Crimson was definitely my color of choice. And at the moment, I still wouldn't change it for any other shade. Next, we have Perylene Violet. Personally, I love this shade. It's such a muted red or violet, it's hard to describe. It's very unique, and I don't think it's very necessary for the beginners, and I wouldn't say I use it very much, but I do use it and I do like it. The only thing that I find weird is that although it seems like a dark color, it's not that easy to make it very intense, and I'm not sure if this is a regular thing for this shade or if this is the characteristic of those particular paints. I don't have this color from any other brand, but it's the same with another color that I have from this family, Perylene Green. It's also a very dark and muted green, but you can't really get a very dark shade with it. And this is something that frustrates me a little bit with those two colors, but they are so beautiful that I would definitely buy them again, and I'm glad I have them. If we mix Perylene Green with Perylene Violet, they do mix a very nice gray, so it's additional benefit to have them. I also think they are the shade that you cannot achieve with anything else, so even if you don't use them on a regular basis, there probably will be time when you will need them. I know that Perylene Violet is useful for botanical paintings. I definitely recommend this color, and Perylene Green as well. Hi, editing me again. So I think I should say a little bit more about those Perylenes, because my swatch says a little bit else than what I say. On the swatch, you can see that part of it is very dark and intense, but notice that the top of the swatch got very pale. I mean, it's not very pale, but much paler. And in this swatch, I tried to really get a lot of pigment to the paper. That's why the bottom is so dark. There was a little bit more water there and all the pigment fell down to this bottom part. But while painting, I usually get something more like the top of the swatch. Maybe a little bit darker, but not that intense. And this is what I mean by saying that this color is paler. I still think it's very pigmented. It's just that its maximum value is not that dark. And it's the same with the Perylene Violet. I think I've said before that it's a pale color. Looking at the swatch, I wouldn't say it's pale. It's just that for this type of color, I would expect a value to be able to be much darker than it is. And on the swatch, you can see that it's slightly lighter in value than Dioxazine Purple. And personally, I would expect it to be at least the same. But as I said, I don't have those colors from any other brand, and I don't know if this is a characteristic of those particular pigments. So if you do, definitely let me know, because I'm actually quite curious. I think both of those colors are extremely beautiful, and I don't want you to have a bad impression of them because of what I said. They are very useful. I use them a lot, and they just don't get as dark as I expected them to, but they are still very intense and pigmented. Dioxazine Violet, I think it's a must, especially if you paint botanical paintings. It's a perfect shade of violet, exactly in the middle. It's not too warm, it's not too cool. It's also a single pigment color, definitely useful with mixes. I wouldn't say it's essential because, of course, you can make your own violet, but it's a very convenient color to have. Magenta, I think it's my favorite color. I really think it's a must-have color. Before I started to get more interested in which colors to get last year, I never thought about this color as useful, but it can actually be one of your primary colors palette, and you can use it instead of other red. Of course, it depends on the style and the subject, but you cannot really get this color with anything else. If you need to paint something pink and you use other red, even if it's a cool red as Alizarin Crimson, you won't be able to get pink from that. You can dilute it to make it less red, but it will still be too warm for a pink. And magenta is perfect for that, especially for topics that do have a lot of pink, such as botanicals. I think it's a must-have, and I use it a lot. It's such a bright color, it's very intense, and it's also light fast. I know there is a similar shade in some brands called Opera Pink. The drawback of this color is that it's very fugitive. I've never seen this color live, but from descriptions of other people, it's very intense, almost fluorescent. And it's hard for me to imagine because this magenta color seems very bright and almost fluorescent to me, so I really don't know how different the Opera Pink is, but I simply love this color. I've recently started a painting containing a lot of this magenta, and to me it's beautiful, so to me it's a must-have. I think I said it a couple of times already. In my previous video, I mentioned that I have an issue with this particular paint. It's not marked as granulating, but for some reason, it did granulate on my palette, it did granulate on paper. It was very weird because this color is mentioned as not granulating, so I was quite confused. However, someone in the comments mentioned that perhaps it has something to do with the brushes and maybe there's some residue of other paints and I should clean them thoroughly with some brush soap and check then. So since then, I did clean my brushes with soap a couple of times, and to be honest, the problem seems to disappear, and perhaps it was because of some residue on my brushes, especially that I did have new brushes, and maybe there was even some residue from the brush factory or something like that. I have no idea, but it did stop granulating for me. So the descriptions are true, that this is not the granulating color and it was something wrong on my side. And by the way, I'm really glad that it's not granulating and you can achieve a smooth color with it. Next is Cobalt Sea Blue. I wouldn't say it's a necessary blue, but it does come in handy and you can get nice colors with it. So I'm glad I have it. It does granulate though, so it's not perfect for every use. I remember that mixing it with Aquarius Brown, which also granulates, made a very nice effect, and I like the colors that appear when you mix those two. And while Aquarius Brown is very granulating, and you can see it on both hot press and cold press paper, Cobalt Blue is not that strong, and on smooth papers, you barely can see it, so the effect is not as strong. Deep Green Gold, it's actually a yellow pigment, but it looks green. But I cannot find any other words to describe it as a golden green. I think the name is very accurate, and I'm glad I have it. I find a lot of uses for it, especially if you paint foliage or greenery that is brightly lit by light. I use it very often, but I wouldn't say it's a necessary color. You definitely can achieve the similar effect by mixing yellow with a drop of blue, but it's a nice convenient color to have, and it's also a single pigment color, so that's a plus. Next is Aquarius Green. This is a very well-known mix, beloved by many people, so I don't think I have to add anything to this. I definitely am glad to have it. It has such a beautiful shade and it can get very dark. I definitely use it a lot. Next are two greens, Autumn Green and Aquarius Green. Both are granulating greens. Autumn Green granulates with some orange and yellow, while Aquarius Green granulates more with some cooler shades like bluish and brownish. You can get very dark with this color, and if I need some very dark but muted green, I definitely use a lot of this color. Autumn Green, on the other hand, is perfect when you want to paint some background with one color, but you don't want it to be flat, because it granulates with beautiful colors. This effect is uncomparable to anything. It's definitely kind of a hyped color. I got it simply because I loved the effect. It's definitely not necessary. to have, but I'm still very glad I got it. It's a very fun color, but you definitely don't need it if you want to be more minimalistic. So Perylene Green, I've already talked about. I don't think there is much to add. The only thing I don't like about it is that it doesn't get dark enough. Next is Mineral Violet. I think this is the color I've used the most of. When I look at my box, you can already see the bottom of the pan. There's still a lot on the sides, so I'm not running out of it yet, but still I'm quite surprised how much I've used. This is another fun color that you don't need if you don't want to. It's also a mix of ultramarine blue and magenta, just not this magenta because this is Quinacridone Magenta, and the pigment is PR122 if I remember correctly, while Mineral Violet it is mixed with PV19. So it's a little bit different pigment, but if you do have those two colors, PV19 and Ultramarine, which is PB29, then you can definitely mix this color by yourself. You don't need to buy it, although it's convenient to have it pre-mixed. Roman Szmal has a lot of those granulating mixes that are very fun to use, and I think Mineral Violet is one of the most known of it, together with color named Shadow Violet, if I remember correctly. I don't have it, but I have to admit I think about buying it. And to me, those colors perhaps are not the most useful to paint most subject, but for backgrounds, they are amazing. As I usually paint animals, I want them to be the main focus of my painting, and adding those granulating mixes as a background doesn't take away much attention from the main subject, but also adds something such interesting to the background that I love this effect. If I run out of this color, I'm pretty sure I will buy this again. Definitely recommend. Unless you're making a limited palette, then maybe not. But if you want to have some more fun with the painting, those granulating mixes are definitely a way to go. Next is Phthalo Blue. Together with Ultramarine, I think I might talk about both of them. I definitely wanted to get two blues instead of one. I mean, I did get 3 because I also have Cobalt Sea Blue, but if I had to limit myself, I would probably choose those two. Phthalo Blue is such a beautiful and intense color. I love using it for skies. My paint is green shade. There's also a red shade, which I don't have. I have to admit this green shade can add such a nice, intense vibe to the painting. I really love to have it as a color for sky. It has a very wide range of value that you can achieve. Even on this swatch, you can see how light it can be to how intense. On the other hand, Ultramarine, I think it's a color that you definitely must have as well, because some mixes, especially violets, are much more nice with Ultramarine than with Phthalo Blue, at least to me. And it's also such a unique shade that sometimes you just cannot switch it to other blue. You just have to use this one. At least that's how I feel about it. Maybe I'm biased because I love this color, but it's a color that is in many people's palette for a reason. And this Roman Szmal paint, they have a couple of shades of ultramarine, and mine is Ultramarine Intense, and I definitely recommend getting this one because, as the name says, it is very intense and beautiful. Next we have Misty Morning, which is another fun color. I also got it because it's quite hyped on the internet. And again, it's not the color you definitely need, but it granulates beautifully. Its base color, especially if you put a lot of paint on the paper without much water, is basically bluish gray. Quite light in the value, but when you add water, it granulates with turquoise and pink, and it's just so pretty. It's actually a mix of a green pigment and magenta pigment. Again, this PV19 here. I love to use it for some moody gray skies and clouds, even though it perhaps doesn't have a very broad range of use, I love to have it, and I definitely recommend it as another fun color to have. Przybierz Gray is also a granulating color. It can get quite dark, and it also granulates with pink or maybe more purple color. Because it's so dark, it's a little bit less intense than Misty Morning, but it's still quite intense. And the other shade that it granulates with is green, so it's definitely another interesting color to have. But similarly to Misty Morning, it's another fun color. I like using it for backgrounds and for some very moody skies, like stormy clouds or something like this. And last but not least, from my first palette is Shadow Violet. It's a mix of couple of pigments that make up this very dark gray. As you can mix your own dark gray, it's definitely not something that is very necessary, but I definitely like having it on my palette because it makes my painting faster when I don't have to keep mixing such a gray. And because it can get very dark, it's the darkest color that I have on my palette. Sometimes it's very easy to use for fast shadows. The drawback, of course, is that it's quite a lot of pigments, if I remember correctly, about 3 pigments. So you have to be careful when mixing with other colors, not to make it too muddy. I did notice something weird with this color though. I did take it for holidays last year as one of the colors in my 6 colors palette, and it was useful, but it did stratify to the pigment and some gooey substance that actually even left a mark on this swatch card. It is actually fine now after a while of being back home and using it, but for a couple of weeks this gooey substance, it was probably the binder. It was visible on the top of the paint, and when you tried to grab the paint with the brush, it did grab a lot of this binder and you could see a translucent substance and dots of pigment in it. It's the only paint that had this issue, and it's actually fine now, so I have no idea what might have caused it. Okay, now let's talk about the colors that I added later. First color that I added was Lemon Yellow. I wouldn't say I use a lot of it. Still, my yellow of choice is usually Nickel Azo Yellow, but for some more vibrant green mixes, I thought it's useful to have this color and I added it. It's much brighter than Nickel Azo Yellow. Useful to have, but I would still choose Nickel Azo Yellow if I had to limit myself. Next is Yellow Ochre. I did have this in my previous palette and I find this color one of the most useful colors. I honestly don't know why I didn't buy it for my first palette. I don't have much to say about this color. It's very useful, and since buying it, I've used it a lot. It's very nicely pigmented and very useful for many topics as a muted yellow and also in many mixes. I also wanted some brown that does not granulate as much as Aquarius Brown. When I was shopping for those browns, a lot of paints were sold out, so I finally got Cyprus Burnt Umber. It's not perfect because it does granulate a little bit, but only a little bit. It's medium granulating, a very subtle effect, definitely nothing as intense as Aquarius Brown. It's a nice color if you paint animals. It's very useful to have. Previously, when I only had this Aquarius Brown, I had to pre-mix brown every time, which was quite annoying if you need a lot of this. Then Indian Red. It's a color that I like, but it's very difficult for me to use, mostly because this is an opaque color, and with watercolors I find opaque colors so easy to overuse. I still haven't learned how to use it properly. If you paint with translucent watercolors, you really have to work hard to add too much, but with this paint it overpowers everything so quickly that you have to have a very light hand with it. And combined with the next color that I got, which is phthalo green. It creates such a dark, muted brown. In my previous palette, I did have a similar color, and from what I remember, I did use it in the mixes, but it was quite annoying to me how artificially this color looks. But with the new palette, I actually missed this color because for some subjects, you cannot really replace it with anything else. I wouldn't say it's a very necessary green again, but nice to have, definitely. Another color I got was mineral pink. It's another granulating mix. It's quite similar to mineral violet, also a mix of ultramarine, but not with PV19, but PR122, which is this magenta color. So could mix it myself, but to me it's really nice to have to use for the background. It's much more intense than mineral violet. And last but not least is lavender. I actually thought about this color since the beginning, but for some reason I didn't get it. I don't remember if it was unavailable or what was the reason, but I just didn't get it and I quite missed it. It's another color that is not necessary because it's not a primary color, but it's very useful in muting down other colors that I decided I did need it. Here on these smaller swatches, you can see how nicely it can mute down other colors. From what I know, it's a mix that you can do by yourself if you mix ultramarine with red, but you do need some white or buff titanium, I don't remember which one. So you do need white for it, and I don't have that, and I'm not willing to get that. So I decided to go for this pre-made lavender color. It's also opaque, similarly to Indian Red. I think those are the only two colors that are opaque. However, lavender is not as intense and dark, so it's much easier to use than Indian Red. And especially for some backgrounds, when you add little spots of it, it stands out a lot and adds an interesting touch to the painting. So to summarize, after using them for a year, I am very satisfied with the color choices I made. The only colors that I would probably not buy again, or definitely not choose as my first paints, is Aquarius Brown, because it just granulates too much for my preference. There's nothing wrong with this color by itself. I just don't find it that useful for myself. And I would also probably not choose both Przybysz Grey and Shadow Violet. I think I would choose only one of them. They do differ a lot. Przybysz Grey is a granulating color with interesting shades. Shadow Violet is not, but the way I use them is mostly for the darkest parts of the painting when nothing else suits. So I would probably choose only one of them. However, I don't know which one because Shadow Violet is more versatile as it doesn't granulate, but Przybysz Grey has some unique uses. So hard choice, but I would think about those two if I really need them. Same with mineral pink because I can mix this with the colors that I already have, but it's nice to have. Like I said, it saves some time to have it. And the other colors are pretty much used by me on a regular basis, and each of them has a use in my paintings. So there's nothing for me to complain about those choices. Okay, that is all in this video. It took me ages to edit, so it is a little bit later than exactly 1 year after I started using them, but I hope that's fine. Anyway, I honestly love those paints and I hope that you enjoyed my review and found something useful for you. Let me know in the comments if you have your own experiences or opinions about Roman Szmal watercolors. See you in the next video. Bye bye!